it's lame, but this is surreal. This is a very fun conversation. Mehdi, Hasan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I guess a great place to begin the conversation, as I was kind of leading into before you joined us, Mehdi, is the foreign policy situation. It's kind of been all-consuming for people who are on the American left. We've kind of been aimlessly staring at one disaster after another, both domestically, with the fires and the blizzards and all of that, but primarily, the foreign policy disasters that are unfolding. And I thought a good place to begin is a less discussed issue that I think deserves more of the left's attention if we have any to spare, and that's what's going on in Syria. You and your host of with Owen Jones, you host a podcast together. Too Outspoken. Thank you. Sorry about that. And you guys were having a tremendous conversation about how the left had failed Syria in a way, right? You have this fringe element of the left which wants to make excuses for Assad, right? You have a lot of people who are just not interested in paying attention to the issue and not really understanding that while, you can have criticisms of the U.S. foreign policy, and obviously you can have criticisms of the U.S. role in the Israeli genocide of Palestinian people, but just because this man is an enemy of the United States doesn't mean that he was a good leader for the people of Syria. And I'm wondering if you could just shed some light on this issue, right? A lot of people have concerns. There's a lot of discourse about how, the United States is now backing Al-Qaeda in Syria. And if that's the case, that's obviously a tremendous concern for folks. So could you just, kind of shed some light on that and talk about how, as an authentic American leftist that wants to prioritize the people of Syria, how should we be reacting and understanding this issue?
No, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's a great question to start off with, which reminds me that, look, our politics are messed up because our politics become about personalities. And a British leftist who I grew up watching and following, Tony Benn, who was a great Labour parliamentarian, very famous British socialist. And he had a famous, he used to speak in a very particular way, but his line was, it's about the issues, right? Not the people, was what he was going about. And I think we've lost track of that a little bit, right? Especially in an online age. We're just obsessed with figures, government figures, parties, factions, groups. And we forget about the principles. The principles are equality. The principles are democracy. The principles are human rights, equal human worth. And I think we've lost track of that. And so when you look at a foreign policy issue, it's easy to immediately be sucked into the game of, well, who's my enemy and who's my enemy's enemy and who do I like and who do I not like and all of that stuff. And I think that's just lazy. I think we've got to start always from first principles. And in Syria, the very first principle was, are the Syrian people being oppressed, and should we support their freedom? And that was my position. Does that mean there weren't horrible people on on all sides? Of course there were. I wrote about it at the time. The Syrian revolution didn't not have Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups involved in it. But does that mean you throw everyone under the cause? It's like saying, I'm not going to support Palestinians anymore because of what Hamas did on October the 7th. No. So that was my position from the very beginning. I always supported the Syrian people's fight for freedom. I'll support any people's fight for freedom. And I will never support Assad, but that doesn't mean I also supported the rebel group. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. Today in Syria, for example, I see people saying, well, you supported the fall of Assad and look, Israel has benefited and America has I don't care. Right. The fact is, Bashar al-Assad was a horrible dictator. Look at what happened when they started emptying out his prisons. For me, that is more important than this kind of geopolitical chess game. That's not to say that we shouldn't acknowledge the geopolitics. Of course, every faction has their interest. Every country is pushing their own partisan agenda. But if we say we are a left that believes in principles, should believe in that principle of we support the people who are suffering.